The moment the doctor quietly pulled the sheet over my pregnant daughter's face, the world around me stopped making sense. Just minutes earlier, I had been praying to hear my grandchild's first cry. Instead, I found myself sitting alone outside her hospital room, staring at a hallway that suddenly felt colder than any place I had ever known. Nurses walked past with lowered eyes, families embraced one another, and life continued as if mine had not just fallen apart. I have only 14 subscribers so far. My next goal is to reach 50 subscribers. If you enjoy my stories, please subscribe to my channel. Your one subscription means a lot to me. Thank you. I kept waiting for someone to tell me there had been a mistake, that she would open her eyes and smile, the way she always did when she caught me worrying. My son-in-law stood a few feet away, his face buried in his hands. He looked heartbroken, and I wanted to believe his grief was as real as my own. After all, he had just lost his wife and the child they had dreamed about for months. I had no reason to question him. At least not yet. As I struggled to stand, a young nurse hurried toward me. She looked over her shoulder before gently touching my arm. Her hands were trembling so badly that she could barely speak. In a voice no louder than a whisper, she asked if we could step somewhere private. The fear in her eyes made my stomach tighten. When we reached an empty waiting room, she closed the door behind us and took a long breath. Then she looked directly at me and said words that shattered the little strength I had left. Your daughter's death isn't the only tragedy you need to know about. Before she lost consciousness, she tried to warn us about her husband. In that instant, my grief became something far more frightening, because what the nurse whispered next destroyed everything. I thought I knew about my son-in-law. My name is Eleanor, and for most of my life, my greatest blessing was my daughter, Sophie. After my husband passed away from a sudden heart attack nearly 12 years ago, the two of us became everything to each other. We learned how to survive our grief together. Some days we cried over old family photographs. Other days we laughed over burnt dinners and silly television shows because we knew her father would have wanted us to keep living. She was not only my daughter, she became my closest friend. My reason to keep moving forward when life felt unbearably heavy. Sophie possessed a rare kindness that could never be taught. She remembered birthdays, volunteered at community food drives, and never left a room without making someone feel seen. Even during difficult times, she believed people deserved patience before judgment. Watching her grow into such a compassionate woman filled me with pride that words could never fully express. When she introduced me to Daniel, I saw a confident, respectful young man who seemed completely devoted to her. He listened carefully whenever she spoke, held doors open without thinking, and treated me with warmth from the very beginning. I remember telling my sister that Sophie had finally found the partner her father would have admired. Their wedding was small, intimate, and full of genuine smiles. As they exchanged vows, I silently thanked God for giving my daughter another chance at happiness after so many years of carrying quiet sadness. The news of her pregnancy made our family feel complete again. Sophie spent evenings decorating the nursery, carefully folding tiny baby clothes, and dreaming aloud about bedtime stories and family traditions. Every ultrasound picture became another treasure on my refrigerator. She glowed with excitement whenever she spoke about becoming a mother. And seeing that joy healed parts of my own heart I thought would always remain broken. Looking back now, I realize happiness can sometimes hide uncomfortable truths. Daniel often stepped outside to answer phone calls he refused to explain. He became strangely protective of his laptop and financial paperwork. Occasionally, Sophie mentioned unexpected expenses, brushing them aside before changing the subject. Whenever I asked whether everything was truly all right, she smiled, but the smile never reached her eyes. I noticed the hesitation, the tiredness behind her cheerful voice, and the way she squeezed my hand just a little longer before saying goodbye. Deep inside, something felt different. Yet I convinced myself every marriage faced difficult seasons. I wanted to believe love would solve whatever burden they carried. Now, as those memories return one by one, I understand a painful truth. The signs had been there all along. I was simply too hopeful to see what my daughter had been silently trying to survive. The following week I met the nurse again, this time with my family lawyer beside me. She had finally gathered the courage to tell us everything she remembered. Her voice shook with guilt because she believed she should have spoken sooner. According to her, Sophie had been desperate to talk before the medical emergency began. She kept repeating that she needed someone to witness something if anything happened to her. At the time, everyone assumed she was simply frightened about childbirth. None of them imagined she was carrying a completely different fear. As we quietly began looking through Sophie's financial records, disturbing pieces started falling into place. Daniel had accumulated enormous personal debts over the previous year. Several credit cards were nearly exhausted, and there were loans Sophie had never mentioned to me. Even more troubling, money had disappeared from accounts they shared together. The transactions were carefully hidden among ordinary expenses, but they formed a pattern that could no longer be ignored. Then another painful truth emerged. Daniel had been seeing another woman for months. Photographs, hotel receipts, and messages revealed a relationship Sophie had discovered only weeks before her due date. Reading those messages felt like losing my daughter all over again. While she had been decorating a nursery and preparing to welcome their baby, the man she trusted had been building another life behind her back. But betrayal alone was not the end of it. Our lawyer uncovered several legal documents carrying what appeared to be Sophie's signature. They authorized changes involving family, investments, and property connected to my late husband's estate. When I compared those signatures with letters Sophie had written me over the years, the differences became impossible to ignore. Someone had forged her name. The nurse lowered her eyes before sharing one final memory. The evening before labor, Daniel had brought paperwork into Sophie's hospital room. He insisted she sign immediately because the documents were supposedly routine. Financial updates. Sophie carefully read the first page before pushing everything back toward him. She became visibly upset and accused him of lying. Staff members later heard raised voices through the closed door before Daniel stormed into the hallway with anger written across his face. Although the doctors remained certain Sophie's death resulted from tragic medical complications, everything surrounding her final days suddenly carried a darker meaning. She had entered that hospital carrying not only the weight of pregnancy but also the crushing knowledge that her own husband had betrayed her trust. Yet outside that room, no one knew the truth. At the funeral, relatives embraced Daniel, praising him for his strength. Friends told him Sophie would have been proud of the devoted husband he appeared to be. He accepted every comforting word with lowered eyes and carefully timed tears. Watching people admire him while knowing what I now knew felt almost unbearable. Even then, Daniel carried himself with quiet confidence. He believed every secret had died alongside my daughter. He believed the sympathy surrounding him would soon become an inheritance. What he never imagined was that Sophie had left behind something far more powerful than memories, and it was waiting for the right moment to speak for her. Everything inside me wanted to confront Daniel the moment I learned the truth. I wanted to demand answers, to ask how he could betray the woman who had loved him without hesitation. But anger would only warn him that his secrets were no longer safe. Instead, I chose silence. It was the hardest decision I had ever made, yet it was also the wisest. If Sophie had spent her final days protecting the truth, then I owed it to her to finish what she had begun. Our lawyer introduced me to a private investigator with years of experience handling financial fraud. He never made dramatic promises. He simply said that lies often collapse under the weight of careful patience. Together with the nurse, we began collecting every piece of information we could find. Nothing was dismissed as too small. Every receipt, every email, every forgotten note became another piece of a puzzle that slowly revealed the life Sophie had been forced to hide. The investigator recovered several deleted emails from Sophie's online account. Reading them broke my heart. She had written to herself instead of sending messages to anyone else, almost like keeping a private diary. In those words, I found the daughter I knew so well. She never complained about herself. Her greatest fear was not losing money or property. She feared bringing a child into a home built on lies. She admitted she no longer trusted Daniel but wanted undeniable proof before making any life-changing decision. Soon afterward, another discovery emerged. Sophie's cloud storage contained short voice recordings she had secretly made after difficult conversations with Daniel. They captured his growing pressure for her to sign legal documents she did not understand. Although the recordings revealed no violence, they exposed manipulation, intimidation, and relentless emotional pressure. Each recording strengthened our belief that Sophie had realized something was terribly wrong. Then the nurse remembered one final detail. Before the emergency surgery, Sophie had asked her to place a sealed envelope inside her personal belongings if she was unable to speak afterward. Somehow, during the confusion surrounding her death, that envelope had been overlooked and stored with forgotten hospital property. When the nurse placed it into my trembling hands, my heart nearly stopped. My name was written across the front in Sophie's unmistakable handwriting. Inside was a handwritten letter filled with calm determination. She explained exactly what had frightened her, listed documents she believed had been forged, and begged me not to trust appearances if anything happened to her. At the bottom, she had written one final sentence. "Mom, if you're reading this, please let the truth protect our family's future." That sealed envelope changed everything, and for the first time, I knew Daniel's confidence would not survive what Sophie had left behind. The inheritance meeting took place 6 weeks after Sophie's funeral in the conference room of my lawyer's office. Around the polished wooden table sat Daniel, several close relatives, 2 attorneys, and the executor of Sophie's estate. Daniel arrived wearing a dark suit and the same sorrowful expression he had shown since the funeral. He greeted everyone politely, accepted their condolences once again, and settled into his chair with quiet confidence. Watching him pretend to be the grieving husband while knowing what I knew tested every ounce of my patience, but I remained silent. The truth needed no help from anger. When the meeting officially began, the executor reviewed the estate and explained how the assets would normally be distributed. Daniel nodded calmly, believing everything was unfolding exactly as he had planned. Then my lawyer gently interrupted and requested permission to present newly discovered evidence that directly affected the estate. The room became completely still. The first document placed on the table was Sophie's handwritten letter. Daniel's expression changed for the first time. My lawyer read every word aloud. Sophie's calm handwriting described the pressure she had endured, the documents she believed had been forged, and her growing fear that someone she once trusted no longer had her best interests at heart. No accusations were exaggerated. Every sentence was thoughtful, measured, and deeply personal. When the letter ended, no one spoke. The nurse was then invited to describe her final conversation with Sophie. Although nervous, she answered every question honestly. She explained how Sophie had tried to warn someone before losing consciousness, and how she had entrusted the sealed envelope to the hospital staff. Her testimony matched every timeline already established by medical records and witness statements. Next came the voice recordings. The room filled with Daniel's own voice as he repeatedly pressured Sophie to sign financial documents she clearly did not understand. His words were calm enough to avoid sounding openly threatening, yet the manipulation was impossible to ignore. Each recording revealed a man determined to obtain signatures instead of protecting his pregnant wife. The silence that followed felt heavier than any argument could have been. Finally, the investigator presented bank records, forged signatures, hidden debts, and evidence connecting Daniel's secret relationship to suspicious financial transfers. None of it proved Sophie's tragic death had been intentional. The medical findings remained unchanged, but together, the evidence established a clear pattern of deception, financial misconduct, and betrayal that could no longer be dismissed. Daniel tried to defend himself, insisting every misunderstanding had an innocent explanation. Yet each answer only led to another contradiction. Relatives who had comforted him at the funeral slowly lowered their eyes. Some quietly shook their heads. Others looked at me with expressions of regret, realizing they had judged the wrong person all along. The executor announced that the inheritance would immediately be frozen until the financial irregularities were fully resolved. Our lawyer confirmed that the evidence would also be forwarded to the appropriate authorities for investigation into the alleged forgery and fraud. Daniel's confidence disappeared completely. He left the room without another word, not because anyone forced him to leave, but because there was nothing left to defend. As the door quietly closed behind him, I felt no joy, only peace. Sophie's voice had finally been heard, and her dignity had been restored. I believed the hardest part of my journey was finally over. I was wrong. Even after justice had begun its quiet work, one final surprise awaited me, and it would become the most precious gift my daughter could ever leave behind. Several months have passed since that unforgettable meeting. Yet not a single day goes by without thinking about Sophie. Grief has not disappeared. It has simply become quieter, settling into my heart like an old companion that no longer surprises me. Some mornings I still expect to hear her cheerful voice calling my name. Then reality gently reminds me that love does not always stay beside us in the way we hope. On the first anniversary of her passing, I visited her grave carrying fresh white lilies and the tiny baby blanket she had carefully folded before leaving for the hospital. She had imagined wrapping her newborn in that blanket on the journey home. Instead, I placed it beside her headstone, smoothing its edges with trembling hands. The wind moved softly through the trees, and for the first time since losing her, I felt something stronger than sorrow. I felt peace. Justice had not brought my daughter back, nor had it erased the emptiness she left behind, but it had given her something that mattered deeply. Her name had been cleared. Her voice had been heard. The truth had protected the dignity she carried throughout her life, even when others tried to take it from her. Inspired by her courage, I began volunteering with a local organization that supports people experiencing emotional and financial abuse within their families. Every conversation reminds me that manipulation often hides behind polite smiles and closed doors. If sharing Sophie's story encourages even one person to trust their instincts or ask for help, then her courage continues to change lives in ways neither of us could have imagined. Sometimes I still read her final letter. Instead of filling me with pain, it now fills me with gratitude. Even during her darkest days, she thought about protecting those she loved. That was the kind of woman she had always been. I have learned that silence may protect deception for a season, but truth has remarkable patience. It waits quietly until the right moment to step into the light. When it finally does, no carefully constructed lie can stand against it forever. As I walked away from Sophie's grave that afternoon, I realized her greatest legacy was not the life she lost, but the courage she left behind. A lie can bury the truth for a while, but it can never bury the consequences. 7,000. Friends, I have only 14 subscribers so far. My next goal is to reach 50 subscribers. If you enjoy my stories, please subscribe to my channel. Your one subscription means a lot to me. Thank you.